It was just past 1 a.m. when everything changed. 3 off-duty Marines were winding down after a long day, grilling some late-night burgers on the back patio of a quiet suburban home. The neighborhood was silent, the kind of place where nothing crazy ever happens, until tonight. Out of nowhere, a group of men posing as HOA enforcers stormed up to the house. Dressed in fake uniforms and armed with batons, they didn't knock. They didn't even announce themselves. They kicked the door in like a scene out of a bad movie, waking up half the block. At first, the Marines thought it was some kind of drunken prank. But one look at the anger on these guys' faces and the weapons in their hands, and they knew this was real. Training kicked in instantly. The fake HOA cops barely had time to figure out what was happening before the 3 Marines moved as one. Years of discipline, instinct, and brotherhood took over, and in just 8 seconds, the situation flipped completely. But what drove these fake enforcers to attack a random home in the middle of the night? Who were they really working for, and how far were they willing to go? Stay tuned, because what happened next was even crazier than the takedown itself. As the fake HOA cops lay restrained on the ground, the Marines quickly scanned the scene, still on high alert. The whole thing felt off from the start. Real HOA officials don't show up at 1 in the morning, much less dressed like some bootleg SWAT team. And something about the way these guys moved, nervous, disorganized, screamed that they weren't professionals. While one Marine called the real police, the others kept watch, trying to make sense of the mess now unfolding on their doorstep. Neighbors peeked through windows, some brave enough to step outside, whispering about the loud crash and shouting. Word spread fast that a group pretending to be HOA officers had tried to force their way in. But why this house? Why tonight? It wasn't like the Marines were causing problems. They were known around the block as the polite, respectful types who always waved hello and kept to themselves. When the local police arrived, things got even stranger. The officers immediately noticed that the fake badges and IDs were cheaply made, almost laughable under real inspection. But these weren't just random troublemakers. Hidden inside one of the attackers' jackets was something much more concerning, something that suggested it wasn't just a stupid prank gone wrong. It was something planned, and the real reason hadn't come to light yet. When the police searched the fake HOA enforcers more carefully, things took a darker turn. Tucked inside one of their backpacks were blueprints, not just of the Marines' rental house, but several other homes on the same street. Some pages were marked with strange symbols and times scribbled in the corners. None of it made sense at first, but it was clear this wasn't a random break-in. It was organized, and the Marines' house had been just one of several targets that night. As the investigation deepened, one officer pulled the Marines aside and asked if they had any enemies, maybe someone from a past deployment or old grudge. But the men shook their heads. They had lived clean, stayed out of trouble. If anything, they were the last people you'd expect to get caught in the middle of a neighborhood crime like this. And that's what made it even more confusing. Why would fake HOA cops go after 3 trained military veterans when easier targets were just a few houses away? Meanwhile, neighbors started coming forward with their own strange stories. For the past week, unfamiliar cars had been cruising slowly through the neighborhood at odd hours. Some even mentioned weird inspections that never matched the real HOA's schedule. Piece by piece, a bigger and much more dangerous picture was starting to form. As detectives dug deeper, the strange details kept stacking up. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes caught blurry images of the same black SUV circling the block at least 4 times earlier that evening. Its plates were fake, just like everything else tied to the fake HOA cops. Worse, the more the Marines and neighbors talked, the more they realized how coordinated the whole thing had been. Someone had been scouting the neighborhood for days, maybe even weeks, and they had timed everything down to the minute. By now, the rumor mill was out of control. Some said it was a robbery ring targeting veterans. Others whispered about something even bigger, organized crews pretending to be authority figures to case houses without raising suspicion. The theory that hit hardest was the one nobody wanted to say out loud. Maybe the Marines weren't the only ones targeted. Maybe a whole community was being watched. Tension in the neighborhood hit a boiling point. Every strange car was now a potential threat. Porch lights stayed on all night. Families triple-checked their locks and pulled their kids inside at the slightest sound. Even the police presence wasn't enough to calm nerves, because if these fake HOA cops had inside info, it meant someone local could be helping them. Someone who knew the homes, the schedules, and exactly when to strike. And the worst part, the real attack might not even be over yet. Just when everyone thought things couldn't get any worse, the second twist hit, and it changed everything. Late the next evening, as police were still piecing together evidence from the fake HOA bust, another house just 2 streets over was hit. Same style, same fake uniforms, but this time the crew didn't just kick in a door. They bypassed the security system completely, almost like they knew the homeowner's exact setup. This wasn't some sloppy smash and grab. It was surgical, planned, and way too clean to be random. The terrifying part: the homeowner was a retired police officer who had spent years working undercover. His house had cameras, alarms, reinforced locks. None of it mattered. They were in and out in under 5 minutes, leaving behind barely a trace. Whatever these fake HOA enforcers were after, it clearly wasn't just valuables. They wanted something or someone, and they were willing to risk everything to get it. Word spread fast through the neighborhood again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was panic. If trained veterans and experienced cops weren't safe, who was? The Marines who stopped the first attack knew they couldn't just sit back now. This was bigger than a few fake IDs and stolen batons. Someone had declared war on their quiet suburban street, and the real battle hadn't even started yet. The very next night, the Marines decided they weren't waiting around for another surprise attack. With the blessing of the real police, they teamed up with a few trusted neighbors and set up quiet watches around the block. No big patrols, no flashing lights, just normal people keeping an extra set of eyes open. Hours passed with nothing but silence. Then, just after 2 a.m., the same black SUV rolled slowly down the street, its headlights off, moving like it owned the night. The Marines moved fast, cutting off the street from both ends, while the police closed in from a few blocks away. When the SUV realized it was trapped, the driver tried to floor it, but it was too late. Within seconds, the Marines and officers surrounded the vehicle. What they found inside dropped everyone's jaws. It wasn't just the fake HOA crew from before, it was a whole team, armed with lock-picking tools, detailed floor plans, and even old police scanners. But the real shocker: buried under the seats were files with photos and personal information about nearly every family on the block. Turns out, the fake HOA cops were part of a bigger operation targeting military veterans and retired law enforcement for identity theft and high-end burglaries. But here's a final twist. One of the men arrested was a former HOA board member from another town, using old connections to make their scams look real. The quiet street was finally safe again, but no one would ever look at a simple knock on the door the same way. In the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly started breathing again. The police confirmed that the fake HOA cops were linked to a larger network that had been hitting different communities across the state. Thanks to the quick actions of the 3 Marines, this operation had been shut down before it could destroy more lives. The real HOA also stepped up, updating the community with safety tips and promising better communication to make sure nothing like this could happen again. Neighbors who once barely nodded at each other were now talking, checking in, and building real connections. The bond formed during those tense nights became the street's biggest strength, and as for the Marines, they went back to their quiet lives, but everyone knew they were the reason the neighborhood still felt like home. Their instincts, discipline, and courage had stopped something much bigger than a simple break-in. Neighbors who once barely nodded at each other were now talking, checking in, and building real connections. The bond formed during those tense nights became the street's biggest strength. And as for the Marines, They went back to their quiet lives, but everyone knew they were the reason the neighborhood still felt like home. The whole experience was a wake-up call, reminding everyone that sometimes danger doesn't come looking like a stranger. Sometimes it shows up pretending to be something you trust. But with community, awareness, and a little bit of grit, even the most unexpected threats can be brought down before they ever really take hold.